would recognize you without the shade.
That's right. I'm Arla Ralston, and I got to know Hal the best working at the Good News Mountaineer Garage with Barbara. I knew Hal a little bit before. He sold me an invisible fence, and then Cheyenne and Cyrus were friends with Brendan and all these kids who hung out when they weren't hanging out at my house, out at Hal's. We were like the town place to hang out, and he was the country place. But it was when I went to work with him and Barbara at the Good News Mountaineer Garage that I really came to appreciate him. Hal was like the consummate car guy, and this was like the perfect job for him in many ways. And I mean, now you sit here in this building at the Good News Mountaineer Garage, and you know, it's just beautiful, and there's bays back there, and it's like an established thing. But you have to realize that when it was just me and Hal and Barbara figuring out how you take this brilliant, beautiful idea of getting donated cars and fixing them up and giving them to people, it was pretty chaotic. And Hal kind of seemed to thrive on that phase, I think, in a way. But he was the person we turned to about the cars. I used to say that I thought this would be a great job if it weren't for the cars. And it was a great job. It was one of the most beautiful adventures, like every day. You never knew exactly what was going to happen. It was like a roadshow movie. It was like Thelma and Louise and Hal. But I'd talk to somebody who wanted to donate a car, and I'd be kind of like, well, what color is it? And Hal would be like down into the nitty-gritty about the engine size and all this kind of stuff. But he loved cars, and that was a good thing in the job, but it was also a bad thing, because Hal couldn't say no to a car. And in those early days, we would go out there, and some of these people, not all, but some people were just dying for us to come and tow their car away and give them, they'd be there with the title already signed, and, can you get it out of the driveway? And you'd have to jump them, and then that didn't work. But Hal would look at those cars, and he would usually find something he thought he could use. Like maybe the tires were okay, or the engine looked pretty good, or the transmission, something. And I'd be like, Hal, what are we going to do with this car? And he'd be like, we can find a use for it. And, he and Barbara and I had these arguments with Hal almost daily about cars that he was sure we could use. And he was able to find things that he could take out of one car and put in another car and make it work and put it on the road for some family. And it was a great thing, but in the meantime, we accumulated a lot of cars. And we didn't really have a place for them. And the city of Charleston gave us this lot over here, which we rapidly filled up with cars that would not run and probably would never run. But, Hal couldn't give up on that car. He just couldn't let go of it. And so he would come up, he was very creative with ideas of how to make certain cars work. And I remember the one time that Barbara and I sort of like drew the line. I don't remember if the seat didn't work or what, but anyway, he wanted to strap blocks on the gas and brake pedals so that, we were like, no, Hal, we can't do that. But, he would have just about made anything work if he could. And he didn't kind of give up. And so one time, when Hal was gone off on one of his sailing ventures, over in the city told us we had to get some of those cars out of there. They just had to go, because the water had started coming up, and at one time we had to go and move all the cars to someplace else because it was going to flood there. It seems like we were always moving cars, and we didn't have enough places for them. So while Hal was gone, Barbara and I took about 30 cars from that lot up to Quincy to the auction and had them sold for whatever we could get out of them to help the program while Hal was gone. He came back, he was so mad that all those good cars were gone. But sometimes we had so many cars and no place to put them. And I think this also appealed to Hal, the kind of outlaw thing, you know. We had parking passes at the Huntington garage for our 3 personal vehicles for driving to work. And I can't tell you how many cars we had stashed up in there that weren't supposed to be there. And we drove them completely crazy. They were always threatening to throw us out. And you get this pass and you go in, and then if you don't come back out, you can't get back in. And it was like math, trying to keep track of whose parking pass was good for what. And so many times to get another car in or to get another car out, we would have to like line up real close behind each other with a car, and when the gate came up, we'd speed through as fast as we could, and the bar would come down and clunk on the trunk of somebody's car. But we'd get it in there, and I think we probably could have found some other solution to that problem, but I think we just liked it. It was much more fun to be sneaking these cars into the Huntington parking garage than to be, you know, coming up with something else more conventional, like Brendan said. But, you know, when I first went to work at the garage, too, everybody's talked about how Hal just knew a lot about a lot of different things. And, you know, you could, Cindy Wegman, I think, said, what was it you needed done?
I don't remember, but it was always referred to at my house as the man who knew everything.
Yeah, the man who knew everything. Like, so, you know, if he could tell you how to dismantle a trailer on your property, I think that was it. Or the proper way to clean your cast iron skillet. He told me that once when I wasn't doing it right. Or just about anything. And so I just kind of was always going home and quoting Hal. You know, Roger would say something and I would say, well, you know, Hal says. And I guess at some point he got a little tired of that. Because I remember I went outside one day to go to work, and I said, I don't know, it looks like rain. Do you think I need a jacket? And he said, well, what does Hal say? But I've made the mistake for a period of time of thinking that Hal was infallible. I mean, because he was so confident with all of his pronouncements that I just was sure that, you know, he had to be right. And so he would turn to me and he would say, so Arla, where's the title of that car? And I'd say, I don't know, Hal, do I have it? And he would say, yes, I gave it to you. And I'd be like, did you? I don't think so. Oh, yes. And so I would search my desk, turn everything upside down, and then, you know, we would find it later on Hal's desk. Or on occasion, I found him trying to slip it onto my desk after he had found it. And keys were, of course, the bane of our existence. I mean, you know, I can hardly keep track of my own keys, and we were trying to keep track of, you know, 40 sets of keys, and they were all over, and we were always having to tear the place apart and look for keys. But it was just, I don't know, it was just really kind of a fun adventure thing. And, of course, the best part of the job was giving away cars. And we all loved to do that. And Hal had a real special role in that. He introduced the person to their car. And for Hal, I kind of had the sense it was almost like an adoption. It was really an important thing that they get to know each other and like each other, and he would take them around and show them all the various aspects of their car and what, you know, how it worked, and get them in and sit, and he'd usually make them drive a little bit in the car. And he, you know, we had a lot of young women who had never really driven very much. Some of them, I think, he actually taught to drive before they could get their car. And he certainly taught a number of them how to drive a standard transmission. And you'd see them out there on the top floor of the Huntington parking garage where we had stashed the car, lurching around while these women, because that's who we mostly gave cars to, as they tried to learn how to operate a standard transmission, just the clutch and in and out. And but he was just a real joy to work with, and not that there wasn't some occasional friction, but especially if we dared to question him on a car and what it was worth and what we should do with it. But he always wanted to save the car, and he'd get really attached to them, and I think, when I thought about this, listening to other people today, I think that was the way he was about people too. If you were his friend, you were his friend forever, and he didn't want to let you go. And if you did something, or you broke down, or something happened that wasn't right, he still didn't want to let go. He thought we were all salvageable, and so, or had some use or some purpose. And so that's, I guess, the biggest lesson that I learned from working with Hal at the Good News Mountaineer Garage. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ned Kelly, and I feel like I've only known Hal for about 10 or 15 minutes, because they say, time flies when you're enjoying yourself, and I look around and I know the stories that you guys must have going on all those years that you've known him, and I wished I could have known him longer. The first time that he came to Jack and Sharon's house in Clendenin, I looked out the window and I said to myself, I've got to meet this guy here. There's going to be some fantastic stories coming out. And I hadn't made it to a Jimmy Buffett concert. 10 years later, well, I made it, and I saw hundreds of Hal's, and I saw dozens of young Hal's too, which was fantastic. And a lot of my friends were big Jimmy Buffett fans. He's the coolest guy, for sure. Within 10 minutes, I went back to my wife, Sheila, it's Leanne's sister, and I said, this guy he's a genius. I said, this guy's a genius. I mean, he seriously is something else. And, I said, he's drinking his foreign beer, his Corona, and he's laughing at me because I'm drinking my foreign beer, and it's Budweiser. And he always used to say, you got to change your beer. And I say, Hal, to me this is foreign. I'll go with it. But he would tell me some things. We had some discussions when I first met him, and I can remember I was telling his sister this at the hospital in Morgantown a few weeks ago when me and Sheila went to see him and Leanne. And I said something to him one day. We're talking. So I don't know. We might have been talking about politics. And he has a way about him. He's very, very similar in how he views the world as I do, although I come from somewhere way across the ocean. But he said something, and I said something back to him, and he looked at me, and I thought, man, I've just said something really dumb right here. And within 5 minutes, he brought the conversation back around, and I looked at him. I said, yeah, I corrected what I said. And he just looked at me like, yeah, that's okay. He said, here, have another Budweiser. So I was very, very fortunate to hang out with that guy. Last Christmas, he came to the house, and obviously the last few years, Hal was struggling, and we all know that. And Hal would talk low, and my wife would tell me, you talk low, sometimes people can't hear what you're saying. I said, well, that's fine. So me and Hal are sitting next to each other on a couch, something like that, down in the basement at Jack and Sharon's house. And Alex is there, Brittany's son, Colton's there, Dylan, Cassie's kid, and I think Emmett was there too, right, Sheila? Emmett, our grandson, was there. He's only a little wee lad. But me and Hal stole the binoculars off the kids and the walkie-talkies, and we're sitting on the couch, and Hal's looking at me through these walkie-talkies, and the binoculars, he's talking to me on the walkie-talkie, and I can barely hear what he's saying. So I started talking back to him, and when I looked around, he was leaning over, looking at me. He said, "You're going to have to speak up, Ned. I cannot hear a word you're saying." But obviously the last few years it was very, very hard times for him, but he still had something about him. I used to say to him, Hal, so my parents are Irish, you've got to have, you know, some Irish in you, because he had that twinkle in his eye. And I used to say to him, I said, Webber is the most un-Irish name I've ever heard of, but I guarantee you look back into your ancestry, buddy, and you're going to find a few Paddies, a few Irishmen in there. And he'd say, well, that, you could be right there. You could. Sheila came into the hospital room to see him, and right away, he's laying there, and right away she said, hey, how you doing, sexy? And that eye opened up, and he looked at her, and you could see him. He enjoyed that so much. He wanted to get up, jump out of there, and give us a hug. But he certainly was something else. I wish I had known him longer. When I know I've been around Clay and a few of the guys there up at the house, and those guys, stories that they could tell about him. And, you know, the songs we heard today were fantastic, and some of that first one, Jimmy Buffett's song, definitely sums that guy up for me. One thing that I take from meeting Hal, with everything that he said to me, was he had such a calmness about him. I never saw him losing his cool. He was always so calm, and he loved kids. And the times that I was with him, especially around the holidays, he just loved having them around, and he's super proud of Alex. So I would like you guys to know that. Thank you.
I knew Hal for a while, starting out at Green Creek. I didn't know him, I only saw him once in a while there. I lived with Doug's place for a while, and got to know him better after I came back quite a few years later. He hired me to help refurbish some old houses, one of which he's living in now. He also had a duplex of apartments, which at times had renters that paid, but as a rule they didn't. It was whoever he could help out, which he helped many with many different types of problems. He was that kind of guy. And to work for him was interesting, because he didn't make any noise. You wouldn't know he was there, and then he'd be behind you. Well, can I help? But it was never judgmental on what we were doing and how we were doing it or anything. It became evident a while back that he shouldn't drive anymore, and we talked him out of that most of the time, and finally talked him out of his keys. And I told him earlier on, and if you can't drive, I'll drive you where you want to go. And I had a little stint of that, and it was a lot of fun. He went cool places. We go to different airports, different places, and go up some holler and talk to somebody he hadn't in forever. It was a wonderful thing. But I'm not going to speak very long. Most people have brought it across on what Hal was really like. Like I said before, he used to come down to our, when he first started having hallucinations and things, it was sundowners. He was worse after dark. But here, closer to the last, it just kind of didn't matter. So we felt free to take him out at night. It wasn't any different than the day. So he'd go down to the class and watch me and Pat play, and he suggested that we learn Good Time Charlie, which we're gonna do for you as soon as Pat gets up here. I was privileged also that when he was having his hallucinations, he would tell me about them. And after the sting runs off, I've got quite a few stories and or songs about those. He had circus performers that would perform for him in the parking lot across the street and different things. It wasn't all bad stuff. A lot of it was entertaining. Everybody's gone away. Said they're moving to LA. There's not a soul I know around. Everybody's leaving town. Some caught a freight, some caught a plane. Find the sunshine, leave the rain. They said this town's a waste of time. Yes, they're right, it's wasted mine. Some gotta win, some gotta lose. Good time, Charlie's got the blues. You know my heart keeps telling me you're not a kid at 33. You play around, you lose your wife. You play too long, you lose your life. I got my pills to ease the pain. Can't find a thing to ease the rain. No, I'd love to settle down, but everybody's leaving town. Some gotta win, some gotta lose. Good time, Charlie's got the blues. Good time, Charlie's got the blues. Good time, Charlie's got the blues.
Thank you all, and what we're going to do now is eat, and later on we're going to have a toast of Irish whiskey in honor of Halbert, as my friend Jason Ever called him, and then we're going to have people come up that also would like to tell some stories or talk about Hal. So thank you all. He was a great guy.